Hello, everyone. Welcome back to 31 Days of Devotion. My name is Lodro Rinzler. I'm the co-founder of Mindful, this meditation studio I happen to be in right now, and the author of a number of books on meditation. My latest was the book Love Hurts. And it is a subject that I seem to be working a lot with lately, the subject of love. The previous book was How to Love Yourself and Sometimes Other People. And I'm here to talk with you today about the idea of compassion. Compassion is one of four ways that we often talk about love in the Buddhist tradition. As we notice, the four Brahma Viharas. Brahma, godly, sublime. Vihara can be translated as abode. So the idea is that there's sublime abodes, godly abodes, divine, I've heard divine abodes. Often it's translated by us Westerners as the four immeasurables. I love that because it's the idea that these four aspects of love that we talk about in the Buddhist tradition are actually not these finite things, but they're immeasurable, that they're infinite. So the first one is often known as loving kindness, metta, which is a beautiful practice that was actually developed centuries after the Buddha taught. It's 5th century by Buddhaghosa. He developed the teachings of the Buddha into a series of steps that we could actually practice to offer love to ourselves and then to others. And then the second one is karuna, which can be translated as compassion. I'll come back to that in a second. Because I'm being a little nerdy today, I'll just go through the other two. The third is mudita, sympathetic joy, the idea that we could actually rejoice in the joy of others. And the fourth is equanimity, upeksha. Upeksha is sometimes translated also as inclusiveness, the idea that we could actually just see how inclusive of everyone, the people we know and love, the people we don't know very well at all, and the people that we actually have a hard time with, could we include all of them in our heart? And this actually fits in nicely with our topic today of compassion. Compassion, karuna, the idea that we actually could open our heart to others. If sympathetic joy is rejoicing in the joy of others, here we are opening our heart to the suffering of others. The more we meditate, the more we actually become quite familiar with all the slime and muck of our own mind. The ways that we get really hooked by anger or jealousy or fear. And because we're so aware of what happens when we sit down to meditate and feel those things, we just naturally start to develop an awareness of the people around us. We look around and we say, oh, that person over there, they're really struggling with their own anxiety, or they're really lashing out in anger. And in that moment, we don't judge them because we know it so well. We say, oh, my heart goes out to them. I know how difficult that can be. It's almost an unconscious response to actually just learn that we could open our heart in a way that others could feel supported. Often compassion, when we talk about it, it's not necessarily us fixing other people's problems. In the Buddhist tradition, it's often more us holding space for them. There are four means of compassion that we can actually talk about. I'm getting very nerdy with you all today. I hope you don't mind. Four types of activities. Sometimes this is known as four karmas, karma being activity in terms of this translation. And these four are ways that we can actually show up for other people. The first is known as pacifying, the second enriching, the third magnetizing, and the fourth is actually known as destroying. The first, pacifying, is someone's having a very hard time and our heart goes out to them. We might just need to be the shoulder that they cry on. And that's actually a really beautiful service, to be able to be there for someone. And I maybe actually be that shoulder or hold their hand or just hold space for them to go through what they need to go through. When I've had very difficult times of suffering in my life, I don't remember the greatest brilliant thing that person said to me. I remember that they held space for me to be there and actually express what I need to express. The second is enriching. Enriching, if someone's very depressed, for example, sometimes it's helpful to actually bring them somewhere beautiful, like a museum or a walk in the woods, so that they raise their gaze a little bit, and it's an enriching experience. They feel enriched by their environment. That's an example of an enriching way of being compassionate. That we actually get someone some space and beauty and lightness so that they can experience something other than what they're currently experiencing and wallowing in. Third would be magnetizing. For example, if I have a friend who's very much struggling with their business, I could say, oh, let me introduce you to this other friend I know. Maybe they can help you. It's magnetizing resources for them. Right? So there's ways that we could actually magnetize resources and different qualities for this person to actually feel a little bit more uplifted and a little bit less mired in their suffering. And the fourth is actually destruction, which sounds very brutal, but it's actually more about a cutting quality, you could say. That being compassionate isn't always just about being kind. Or I should say it's not always about being nice. It's always about being kind. Because by kindness, I mean that we're actually acting on behalf of others, inspired to actually benefit them. Nice is like, oh, I'm not just going to say the nice thing because that's going to make me look good. We're actually looking to get beneficial, not to just look good, if that distinction makes sense. So I'm setting aside looking good and looking nice to actually trying to be kind and of benefit here. So sometimes, let me use an example. If you have a friend who's is an abusive relationship, and they keep coming to you and crashing on your couch and crying and saying, I don't know what to do, and 3 weeks later they get back together with their abusive spouse, and you say, okay. Then that happens again a few weeks later. They're back on your couch crying, same situation. After a couple of these cycles, the kind thing to do versus the nice thing to do, the kind thing to do might be to actually sit them down and give them the hard news of, I don't know if this is working for you, this cycle that you're lost in. This may not actually be something that you really are getting much fulfillment out of. The nice thing might be like, oh, good for you, you're back together, right? Like, this is not that. This is a little bit more cutting. This is actually cutting their trip of, this relationship may not be good for you. And it may not be something that they necessarily want to hear, but it's a good thing for them to hear, if that distinction, again, makes sense. So the cutting quality isn't meant to like cut everyone down and make them less. Quite the opposite. It's meant to actually point out reality in a way that might actually be of benefit to them, even if that's a little bit painful for them. So these are 4 aspects of compassion, 4 ways that we might be able to show up and offer compassion activity. With that said, we should probably meditate together. And I wanted to acknowledge the fact that this is sometimes very difficult with particularly the people that we find very difficult. So I'm going to lead us in a meditation I call Just Like Me. And we'll start by a few minutes of mindfulness of the breath, which of course you're very familiar with at this point, even if you have just started meditating this month with this program. But let's start by getting into the body, finding that unique balance between being rooted in the ground, and then gently lifting up through the spine, finding our own natural sense of balance. Sometimes you might even notice I sway a little bit when I sit down on the cushion, back and forth, side to side, just to find that sense of balance through the sits bones. And then, if you're relatively new to meditation, I often recommend picking your hands up at the access point of your elbows, dropping them palms down on the thighs. This is actually going to be a natural resting spot that will give us the most support for our back. Just letting the chin be slightly tucked in, we relax the muscles in our face, uncreasing the forehead, relaxing the muscles around the eyes, the cheeks, even the jaw. So if the jaw hangs open a little bit, that's fine. If you'd like to pick a spot just a few feet ahead of you on the ground, you can relax the gaze so it actually becomes loose and unfocused. Having brought a sense of mindfulness into the body, we bring a full awareness and attention to feeling the breath. However you're breathing in this moment is fine. Just notice the natural cycle of it. And similar to what you have done in the past, when you notice that you've drifted off and you are starting to fantasize about what could happen in the future or replay what's happened in the past, just gently come back to feeling the breath. At this point, I'm going to invite you to actually bring to mind the image of someone whom you really love and admire. It could be a family member, a romantic partner, a best friend. Often whoever comes to mind first is a good person to work with. Holding their image in mind, you can think about the way that they smile, the way that they do their hair, the way that they dress. Make it somewhat visceral in your mind's eye. If you'd like to close your eyes at this point, please feel free. We can start by thinking of some of the positive things that we enjoy about this person. The qualities that they possess. But then we're going to add 3 magic words at the end. Just like me. So for example, if I'm sitting here imagining a close friend, I might say, they have a good sense of humor. Just like me. And in that moment, a little judgmental voice might pop up and say, you're not like that. But have you ever told a good joke? Then you do. You have that within you. So just for a few moments, think of some of these positive things, whether it's their kindness, their ability to hold space for you or for others. And at the end, just say, just like me. Whether you necessarily feel like that's your strong point, or that you don't sit there and to compare yourself and think that you're better or worse than them. Just add these words on, let it land, and move on to the next quality for this person. They're very loving, just like me, whatever it might be. And now you could actually think of some of the not so wonderful things about them. Even though you love them or admire them dearly, you can admit that there are some not so wonderful parts of them. Holding their image in mind, we might even say, they have an occasion to show up late, just like me. Maybe that's not actually something you do regularly, but I bet there's been a time that you've done it. You know what that's like. Sometimes they exaggerate a lot, just like me. Maybe you've been there before. So just focusing now on some of the not so wonderful parts of themselves. Adding these words, just like me, seeing if there's any truth to that. And we can just take a moment to express some gratitude to ourselves for embracing all of this person, the good and the bad, and for this person, for being in our life. And we let their image dissolve. And in its place, we bring to mind the image of someone that we're currently having a hard time with. Maybe it's an ex. Maybe it's someone at work who you're butting heads with. Maybe it's a difficult family member. But bring their image to mind, and I often think it's helpful to imagine not just the way that they dress or smile, but to imagine them in a somewhat relaxed posture, somewhat at ease, i.e. not on the attack. And again, whoever comes to mind first might be a good person to work with. Holding their image there, we start with some of these positive qualities. Even if we feel like we can't find any in this moment, see if you can dig a little bit. Well, they're somewhat polite, just like me. They love dogs. Excuse me, they love dogs, just like me. Just trying to find some basic positive traits and acknowledging that we too have some version thereof. And then, not surprisingly, we get into some of these seemingly negative traits. They're very disrespectful, just like me. Maybe there have been times where we felt that we've been disrespectful. They fib at times, just like me. Whatever it is that we actually are sort of on about with this person, it might come up. And we just add these words, seeing if there's any truth to it, if we've ever actually done the thing that they have propagated, the thing that we are upset about. Just like me. And similar to before, we take a moment to just acknowledge a sense of gratitude for ourselves, for acknowledging the whole humanity of this person, the good and the bad. And then we thank them for being in our life, if for no other reason than because they give us an opportunity to practice compassion. And we let their image dissolve. Come back to just feeling the breath for a moment, letting the breath anchor us once more in our body and in the present moment. When you're ready, you can raise your gaze, relax the body, and come to an end of our particular practice session. So in this sort of practice, we look at the people that we like and even the people we have a hard time with, and see if we can just open our hearts to them. Not from the level of up here, I'm the spiritually evolved, better than you person, and you're down here suffering, but from, oh, I actually know what you're going through, a sense of empathy. Because I get stuck in similar ways. My heart can actually open straight out, straightforward to you. Because we are not so dissimilar as we might think once we actually start to contemplate these similarities. The ways that we really thrive and the ways that we really suffer. The positive traits and the negative. We have both within us. And we are all basically human. And we can celebrate that. The more we look at that, the more compassion grows. Thank you for practicing.